Good morning, everyone. Here's your Mormon news update for November 17th, 2025. Today we are going to start on TikTok with Nicolee Monroe. Nicolee has recently undertaken a social experiment where she calls churches and other religious institutions across the United States pretending to be a struggling mother who has run out of baby formula for her 2-month-old. Monroe, an Army veteran from Kentucky, is neither a mother nor does she have a baby. The situation is entirely fictional. She uses a recording of a crying baby in the background during the calls to make the scenario sound more urgent. The goal is to audit the churches to see which ones would immediately offer help to a desperate mother in a crisis situation. As of the latest reports, Monroe claims to have contacted between 42 and 43 institutions. She reported that only around 9 or 10 of them offered assistance, or at least said they would help, while the majority either declined, referred her elsewhere, or required an application process that could take days or weeks. Let's see how the Mormon Church fared.
So I'm calling your church to test to see if they would help feed a starving baby. And right now I'm going to be calling the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this one is located in Columbia, South Carolina. So we are going to call and see if they would be able to help.
Hello?
Hi, I was wanting to see if y'all could help with a can of formula. I have a 2-month-old and she ran out of formula last night, so she's been going all night and all day without anything to eat.
We unfortunately cannot help with that. Sorry.
Y'all don't help with baby formula or like anything?
I don't, not that I know of, no, sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Not a good look for a multi-billion-dollar organization that claims to be Jesus' one true church on the earth. Matter of fact, it's caused at least one person to further question the church's truth claims. A post on Reddit says this: LDS Church said no. Been struggling with the idea of leaving the church for a while now. This whole social experiment with the lady calling churches asking for baby formula really opened my eyes after hearing the LDS Church say no. So then where are my tithes going? I paid tithes with the idea of them being used for charity and to help the poor. And now I find out that the richest church in the world wouldn't spare $20 for a can of formula? Absolutely disgusting. The funny thing is I tried to rationalize the church saying no while also feeling disgusted by the other churches who also said no. And now that I'm holding them to the same standard, it's even more disgusting to me. Next, let's go to Cowboy State Daily, where it says the court-appointed conservator of a Riverton boy sued the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on Tuesday over a youth group boat tubing incident in which the boy lost his foot. Kelly Rudd, court-appointed conservator for the boy in the case, filed the complaint Tuesday in the U.S. District Court for Wyoming via his attorney, Noah Drew, of the Spence law firm. The complaint, which also asserts claims that the boy's sister suffered trauma for watching the boating incident, identifies both children by their initials only. Rudd is asking for the church to pay the children damages, costs, interest, and other relief the court deems just. The children sustained irreparable and life-altering harm and damages, the complaint alleges. The church, which is headquartered in Salt Lake City but has wards in Fremont County, did not immediately respond to a request for comment. It seems SA isn't the only thing the church is being called out over. Back to the article, the 2 children and 4 other children went on a church boating trip on Boysen Reservoir on August 10, 2022, the complaint says, adding that this was a church-sanctioned event. A woman was pulling children on a tube behind the speedboat. The boy and his sister sat in the back of the boat. The woman told one of the children to feed out the rope for the tube, and the boy tried to help by releasing the rope. The woman suddenly and forcefully accelerated the speedboat, the complaint alleges. The abrupt acceleration caused the coiled tow line to wrap around the boy's left foot. The rope severed his foot, says the document. The girl watched as her brother screamed in agony, says the complaint, adding that the boat engine became flooded with excess gasoline and the group was stranded on the lake. As the driver panicked, the girl called 911. The group paddled to shore to get to care, the document says, adding that the girl used a windbreaker to tourniquet the boy's ankle to stop the bleeding. A life flight helicopter took the boy to Banner Health in Casper Denver, and he was later taken to Denver Health Hospital, says the document. The boy's foot could not be saved and was amputated. The complaint says he'll require lifelong care due to catastrophic injuries. The loss or amputation of a child's limb is not an inherent risk of boating or inner tubing, the complaint asserts. The church carelessly increased the dangers for the children on the boat by failing to provide adequate training and instruction to its young men and young women group leaders. The complaint accuses the church of negligence. The last place this sort of event should be happening is a billion-dollar organization with the vast resources that the Mormon Church has. Legally, an organization is held responsible for foreseeable harm resulting from negligence. Large organizations are expected to have robust risk management, training, and supervision protocols, especially when conducting activities with inherent risks like boating involving children. A lawsuit alleging negligence is the legal mechanism to determine if the organization, the Mormon Church, failed to meet that standard of reasonable care. I absolutely hope that the church does the right thing and takes care of these kids. Next, let's go to the Deseret News for an article by Tad Walsh that says, some cynics don't like the NBA rule that allows college students to play 1 year in college and turn pro. Such one-and-done players aren't real college students. They can take online courses and never participate on campus, the critics say. AJ Dybantsa is not that guy. The BYU freshman is expected to play 1 year at BYU and then enter the NBA draft, where experts project him to be one of the first 3 picks. But he isn't hiding in online classes. I'm actually in 3 in-person classes right now, he said during an interview on Wednesday. I'm taking Mission Prep. It's like Religion 101. I take the required student success class, University 101, and I take this music class that I'm actually going to after this interview. Okay, how many of the people he runs into on campus every day do you think he is going to convert? When I was an all-in Mormon, I actually thought that as soon as someone was open to learning about the church, they were definitely going to convert, because how could they not be swayed by God's one true church? Also, as a reminder, the University 101 class reportedly features the controversial musket fire speech by Latter-day Saint religious leader and former BYU president Jeffrey R. Holland as a core reading. In the speech titled The Second Half of the Second Century of Brigham Young University, Holland condemned criticisms of the Mormon faith, calling on members of the church to defend its teachings with musket fire. One such teaching, Holland said, includes the doctrine of the family and defending marriage as the union of a man and a woman. He also spoke about the issue of homosexuality as it relates to the Mormon Church. We have to be careful that love and empathy do not get interpreted as condoning and advocacy, he said, and addressed the potential friendly fire that could occur as a result of defending the faith. Sometimes it isn't friendly, wounding students and the parents of students. So many who are confused about what so much recent flag waving and parade holding on this issue means, Holland said. Back to the article. Mission Prep is a well-known class among members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which sponsors BYU. Hundreds of students take it every semester as they prepare to serve proselytizing missions. It's designed for people who intend to go on missions, said Lincoln Blumel, Associate Dean over Research in Religious Education. Dybantsa is not a Latter-day Saint. His stated mission is to have BYU help him prepare to play in the NBA. So why would he be taking Mission Prep? Blumel expressed some surprise that was Dybantsa's choice out of a large number of options, but he said it makes sense for a student who isn't a Latter-day Saint to take a class that is steeped in what missionaries will teach and preach. It's covering the essential principles of the gospel, so it could be a real introduction to the gospel of Jesus Christ, Blumel said. I went ahead and looked up the BYU syllabus for that class, and here's what it says. You will understand and seek to develop the attributes of Christ as found in chapter 6 of Preach My Gospel. You will enhance your knowledge of the doctrine through focused study of God's revealed word to both modern and ancient prophets, with a special emphasis on the Book of Mormon. You will understand the restored gospel of Jesus Christ and associated doctrine and principles related to missionary work revealed by God through prophets, seers, and revelators. You will understand the divine purpose of missionary work and the blessings associated with it. You will learn and practice skills that will improve missionary effectiveness, such as effective gospel study, planning and goal setting, time management, and teaching and extending invitations to others. You will create lesson outlines to teach the restored gospel of Jesus Christ more effectively to others. You will be able to teach the missionary lessons effectively to members of the church and to those who are not members. You will understand revealed doctrine and principles in a way that enables you to apply the doctrine and principles in your own life. It also curiously said this class may not be taken or retaken by returned missionaries or non-LDS students. I wonder if they then make exceptions for elite athletes. Back to the article. We offer a limited number of sections of core classes just for non-members, Blumel said. We work with the athletic department to group classes for people who don't know terms familiar to Latter-day Saints but unfamiliar to others, like atonement or restoration. He said the athletic department sends notices to instructors so they are aware when they have a student in a class who may be new to those concepts. Well, of course they do. They wouldn't want anyone spouting off the more weird and controversial doctrines with an outsider sitting in. Next, another tidbit from Deseret News. The Deseret News launched the Deseret Voices podcast on Thursday. Here is part of the trailer.
Welcome to the Deseret Voices podcast, where we believe conversation is the key to understanding America's complex landscape of ideas. I'm Jane Clayson Johnson.
And I'm McKay Coppins. In today's world, it's easy to be overwhelmed by the constant stream of anxiety-inducing news updates and sensational headlines. On this podcast, we don't do sound bites or clickbait. We have deeper conversations that actually help us understand the issues and each other better.
We talk to all kinds of people who have different opinions and differing beliefs. The topics we tackle might be complex or controversial, but our conversations will always be insightful and respectful.
On each episode, Jane or I will connect you to the people behind the headlines. Leaders across the ideological spectrum and advocates trying to reshape the world according to their values. Some of them you might agree with, and some of them you might not.
Our challenge as hosts is to help you find common ground with our guests. We believe that starts with asking thoughtful questions and listening for the real answers, so we can bridge divides instead of widening them.
Personally, I have doubts about the ability of active members to engage in truly impartial dialogue. Mormonism emphasizes itself not just as a set of beliefs, but as the one true living church guided by continuous revelation. This mindset can make productive, open-minded conversation about sensitive subjects difficult, as the outcome of defending the faith is predetermined. Thoughtful conversation often demands vulnerability, non-defensiveness, and the willingness to question the very claims and institutional narratives upon which active believing Mormons' personal identity and social standing are built. Next, we are going to go to the UK for this article that says, growing up in Dunfermline, faith wasn't just part of Christy Watson's life. It was her life. Sundays meant dresses and hymns, weekday mornings began with scripture study, and evenings were filled with youth meetings at the local ward. Her parents were pillars of their Mormon community. Both led missions abroad, and her father served as bishop, then stake president, a lay leader who presides over a group of several local congregations. I was raised in the church. It was the only possible option for me, says Christy. I was incredibly devout. Until I was 16, I never imagined there was another way to live. Raise your hand if this was you. Mormonism was my life. My parents didn't serve missions, and my dad is a convert, but we did all the things all the time. I literally do not remember missing family scripture, prayer, or family home evening even one time. Back to the article. However, when she began to explore her identity as a queer woman, Christy went through what she describes as a life-altering loss of faith. Now 22 and a recent English literature graduate from Edinburgh University, she no longer attends church. Instead, she describes herself as a very adamant atheist. Her journey from committed believer to outspoken critic has been shaped by two discoveries: her own queer identity and the Mormon Church's anti-gay stance. Christy's childhood was steeped in what she calls religious scrupulosity, an anxious fixation on purity and perfection. I felt so much guilt, she says. If I even thought a swear word, it would be a big deal. I was dedicated to the church to a damaging extent. Undoubtedly, there's a thou shalt not list. If you don't live up to the standard, you're deemed unworthy. That's what drives so many people away. From the age of 12 to 18, Christy threw herself into church life. She attended seminary classes before school every morning for 4 years, studying the Book of Mormon for an hour a day, and was a representative for the ward's young single adults. And this is the path for so many devout Mormons. When faith is presented as the only source of light, goodness, and truth, and that faith is then discovered to be the primary source of profound personal pain and self-loathing, members often reject the entire category, not just the specific religion. Christy didn't just become a different kind of Christian, she rejected the premise of divinity altogether. This adamant atheism reflects an absolute intellectual and emotional break, rooted in the realization that a system that requires individuals to damage themselves to achieve perfection cannot be the ultimate source of good. Back to the article. But when COVID-19 hit, cracks began to show. When Christy became friends with a group of queer people at school, her perspective started to shift. I never felt what they were doing was wrong. They didn't judge me for my traditional views, but they showed me there could be other ways of thinking. Oh no, she's on this slippery slope to self-love. The article goes on to say, the Mormon Church, also known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, teaches that same-sex attraction itself isn't a sin, but acting on it or practicing is contrary to God's commandments. For Christy, that message became impossible to reconcile with her own identity. I realized I was queer, and being a woman, I just don't feel welcome at all, she says. Christy was 16 when she began questioning her faith. I actually get a little jealous of those who question in their teen years. I was nowhere near doing that at 16. Back to the article. She stayed in the church for a couple more years because she felt it was expected. During that time, she pretended to believe everything that was being said. However, the emotional strain of hiding the truth took its toll on her mental health, and she decided to quit the church. I wrote my parents a letter explaining I didn't believe anymore and wouldn't be going back, she recalls. It was quite a shock for them. Her brother and sister remain active members of the Mormon Church. It caused a lot of confusion and meant much discussion within the family. This situation is common enough that in the ex-Mormon community, we have the phrase PIMO, P-I-M-O, which means physically in, mentally out. The article goes on, the Mormon Church's teachings around sexual purity still trouble Christy deeply. Young girls are grilled by men about their sexual activity, she frowns. The sexual policing is so disgusting and rampant. Christy said an older man asked her, aged 12, if she was keeping the law of chastity. I said, I don't know what that means. And he said, are you having sex? I was like, I'm 12. Why are you asking me that? It's so intrusive. I think now you're allowed to have a woman with you for these interviews, but it's still disturbing how controlled the process is. Experiences like that can be really harmful for young people. It seems like that is actually what she said to her bishop. I wish there was a video of that. The practice she's discussing is dangerous. Placing an adult male leader, the only person authorized to hold the priesthood keys to determine worthiness, in a closed room with a 12-year-old girl to interrogate her about chastity creates an inherently harmful dynamic. It violates boundaries, potentially normalizes inappropriate questioning, and most importantly, weaponizes the child's burgeoning sexuality against her sense of spiritual self-worth. The article goes on to say, leaving the church was both liberating and deeply painful, admits Christy. It was a massive loss. There are genuinely good things about the church, like the strong community spirit. I had a huge friend group growing up, but once you stop going to church activities, there's no reason to see them. You lose that network overnight. Christy began reading and watching materials her church leaders had long warned against. There was a real fear about any source of information that came from non-church regulated sites, or that could tell you there's another way of living, says Christy. You're told, doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith. Would Christy go as far as to define Mormonism as a brainwashing cult? It depends on your definition of a cult, she muses. If you're talking about control of thoughts, behavior, emotion, and information, I'd say so, particularly when it comes to information control. I feel like there could be a checklist of things that people do and say when they leave the Mormon Church, and Christy is outlining the process so perfectly. Back to the article. Christy is outspoken about the Mormon Church's treatment of LGBTQ+ people. The church insists it's not anti-gay, she says. It's very much a case of you can't be practicing if you're gay. So for them, being in a queer relationship, you don't fit. But when you condemn same-sex love, call queer relationships sinful, and demand celibacy as the only acceptable path, that is anti-gay. She's right. The Mormon Church is anti-gay. Period. For Christy, this hypocrisy is deeply personal. They preach love and acceptance, but only if you fit their mold. Anything outside that, queer people, trans people, is treated as wrong. Any organization that fosters an environment of intense homophobia is unarguably anti-gay. Her criticism of church doctrine extends to gender too. Women can't hold the priesthood. They say we can access it in the next life, but that doesn't make it equal now, she says. It's blatantly patriarchal, no matter how they try to spin it. Now, Christy lives with a flatmate who also left the church. She's open about her sexuality and describes herself as queer, a term she finds inclusive and flexible. I guess you could say I'm bisexual, she explains, but I like the term queer because it encapsulates gender queer too. I've dated women, but I've had boyfriends too. Today, Christy's focus is on rebuilding her identity and using her academic background to process what she's been through. Studying English literature taught me the importance of comparison, she reflects. If you're told not to read anything that might challenge your beliefs, you're being denied critical thinking. That's what high control groups like the Mormon Church do. I remember exactly where I was when I read the majority of Steve Hassan's book, Combating Cult Mind Control, and realized that the Mormon Church fit the definition of a cult. Christy is laying it all out pretty directly. Despite everything, Christy, who works as an assistant curator for a Dunfermline art gallery, doesn't speak with bitterness. I'm not trying to slander anyone, she insists. Most people who taught me were genuinely doing the best they knew how. But I know how isolating it can be when you don't fit outdated, archaic standards. While leaving the church was the hardest thing Christy has ever done, she feels it's the most honest thing. For the first time, I don't feel guilty for just existing as myself, she reflects. This last part of the article is details from a church spokesperson who is unnamed, but let's break it down. The church spokesperson said, "The church helps people draw closer to Jesus and find peace, love, and healing." I would like to clarify that with some people. It is not the right place for all people. They also said, "We are saddened to hear of individuals who have not had this experience when worshiping with us," which I would clarify with, "They are saddened, but not enough to actually change their harmful policies." They also said, "The church encourages love and respect for everyone, including LGBT+ individuals." And I would add, they do not. They encourage tolerance. Love allows someone to be who they are when that does not involve harm to others. They also said all are welcome to worship with us. That is mostly true, although they do bar people from their services if they feel the need. They then said, however, like most faith groups and religions, the church teaches a code of conduct for morality and chastity for all members, regardless of sexual orientation. My thoughts? The law of chastity defines sin as any sexual activity outside of a legal marriage between one man and one woman. This specific rule is applied to everyone. A straight person cannot have sex outside of a straight marriage. A gay person also cannot have sex outside of a straight marriage, or at all, since same-sex marriage is not sanctioned. While the code is technically the same for all, its practical effect means that one group is promised full fulfillment through adherence, and the other is promised a life of permanent self-denial. The spokesperson also said local church leaders, as ordained ministers, are responsible for guiding and supporting their congregations. To be clear, the men are ordained. The women are not. The spokesperson then said, one way they do this is through occasional meetings with youth, which follow strict safeguarding policies outlined in the church's publicly available general handbook. My response? The policies are not that strict, and they are obviously not always adhered to, or there would be less abuse. The church spokesperson then said these policies limit discussions to approved topics and require a parent or another trusted adult be present. Yes, present in the building, but not present in the room. That is optional. They then said women are integral to the spiritual, organizational, and community building efforts of the church. Damn, this guy is good at choosing his words. I'm assuming it's a guy. It could be a woman or non-binary person, but I doubt it. It is true that women do the vast majority of the day-to-day organizational and community building work, but the term integral falls short of describing a truly equal partnership because of the single structural inequality. priesthood authority. And last up today, let's finish with this quote that made me think. It says, "Not to shade religious people, but it's kind of chilling how some folks praise Abraham for being willing to kill Isaac for God to prove his devotion. Like, I don't know about y'all, but if God told me to kill my son, I'd kind of be like, maybe this isn't the God for me." And that's your update for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.